All right, so here we are. Welcome to Crushing Limits Unleashed. Today we have a very special guest who honestly needs no introduction. We have Iain Valliere. Welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. And thank you for saying my name right. I go on so many podcasts and I hear people butcher my name, Valliere. I'll hear Valerie, Valliere. I mean, even guys like Milos, who've known me for 15 years in the industry, I swear he's never said my name right once. So I love when someone will say my name half correct and you nailed it there. So thank you.
Hilarious. I
Off to a
love
good
it,
start, Chris.
Yeah, that's perfect. Starting points in my book there.
Yeah, yeah. It's been a bit, man, since we've seen you. It's
Yeah,
probably a few years since at the Olympia.
yeah, 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 yeah.
But the biggest thing, obviously, the biggest thing that came to mind for me is, you've been to the Olympia, I think, three times, right?
Uh, four times.
Four times. And you
Qualified
placed,
five. I've qualified five because I did Toronto in 23 was the last show I did before I retired, which I won. So I qualified in 23. So I've
right.
qualified five times. I competed in 18, 20, 21, and 22.
Yep.
Right, right.
Yeah, and you placed seventh twice, I believe.
Yeah, back to back years in 20 and 21, I was seventh. Yeah.
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 And most people, when they think of that, you're like right at the cusp to that like elusive like top six, right? And
Especially because the Olympia first call it is always six. So I'm like, I was right there being that
Mm.
one guy, like, middle of second call up, but never in that first group, which definitely fucking irks me when I think back of it. But it's all in good fun.
So I got a question in regards to that then.
Sure.
What do you think could have or would have you would have done maybe a little bit differently to get tighter, better, harder, a little bit more improved to jump to that next little spot?
I honestly think the thing that probably hurt me the most at that level was probably my posing. I think I was definitely not as diligent as I could have been or was compared to some of the other guys with my presentation and showing my physique in the best way possible.
Mm.
And especially at the bigger shows, I definitely succumbed to a bit of stage fright or like imposter syndrome when it got to the really, really big shows. And that really showed up, especially at the Olympias, especially at the Olympias where I had more pressure on me. Like the first Olympia where I came seventh in 2020, I went into that with really no expectations. The Olympia I'd done before, I just cracked the top 15. I placed 14th, which I was ecstatic with for my first Olympia to get a placing. I wasn't just one of those 15, 15, 15, to actually get a placing, I was really happy with. So when I came back in 2020 and got that seventh and beat some really good guys, I was over the moon and, my expectations were exceeded. And then as now my expectations had kind of shifted that, okay, seventh is the standard now. Now I want to do better. I think, I came kind of my own worst enemy, especially with things like that. And, my stage presence probably held me back the most, especially in 2022, the last Olympia I did. I honestly, with not even changing how my physique was, if I had just posed,
Mm.
as good as which I normally do, which is still not amazing, I think I probably could have placed like two spots higher.
Yeah.
And that was just like really bad presentation, not hitting my poses and showing myself the way that I know I could have. So I think that's probably the one thing looking back at my career as a whole, just being more diligent with posing practice is, and
Yeah.
presenting your physique in the best light possible, I think is crucial for sure.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that most people, kind of just that we're so exhausted in prep. And I mean, at your level, it's beyond anything I've ever done. I mean, but at that level, posing, it's probably one of those things like, you got to do it, but you're just like, I'd rather sleep.
Yeah. And you know what? I won't lie and say like, I'm like I'm a gym bodybuilder in a lot of ways, and that like I love bodybuilding, but I don't love competitive bodybuilding in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Like getting on stage is so secondary to me, I admire a lot of guys that love the art of bodybuilding, the posing and the presentation, and guys that put on super high quality posing routines.
Yeah.
Guys in the open, you see it in classic now. That's become like the bare minimum. Like that's the
Right.
standard classic is to pose at that level. But I definitely never was someone that was like super enticed by like that aspect of bodybuilding. I love training. I love the challenge of like pushing myself hard in a diet and like, really seeing like how hard I can push myself and where I can get my physique to. I love that, like that challenge of the individual pursuit of like from a physique and a mental standpoint, but like the rest of it was like, I'm doing this, so I should compete and I can do it at a high level and make a career. So great. But a lot of it was definitely not like I was not doing my due diligence with some of the other aspects, which, you're a professional. It's on you to do that. So I'm not going to sit here and complain about it, but it was definitely probably one of the things that held me back the most. Yeah.
Gotcha. Cool.
Yeah, and obviously, we all follow you, me, Bill, and Stephanie, we've had the privilege, of course, seeing you at every Olympia you've
No
done,
doubt.
which has
Yeah.
been, that firsthand experience is everything,
Yeah.
rather than just, critiquing from pictures or videos.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But leading up to, the final Olympia, like what was it where, where you're just like, that I'm just not in it this time?
Hmm.
I think I knew that my exit from bodybuilding was looming, like it was in the back of my mind a little bit, and I don't know if I was 100% in there. And I also think there was some mental mistakes that were like made the last little while. I think I got in my head a little bit with having placed seventh the 2 years prior, and then knowing that lineup that year was better than the 2 years that I had placed seventh, and getting in my head a bit and being like, and placing myself in the lineup before the show would even happen, which is a huge mistake. I'm all for being realistic, but I think self-belief is still super duper important. And I think I had kind of like counted myself out in that lineup before it even happened. So I think that is part of it. And that probably led to, less than stellar, even more so than normal posing. And then, all the other slew of kind of, physical things that go along with that, with when, you're stressed and anxious, and, the cascade of like hormonal things and cortisol and whatever that goes along with it. And then there was also some small things, I working with Patrick Tour, who, I had the best moments of my career with by far, working with Patrick. That was the first show actually in all of 4 years I worked with him that we were ever actually in person together. He lives in Switzerland. I'm in Canada. He had never come down for any shows, and we had a really good system. I never felt the need for him to be there in person. Most of the coaches I'd worked with was all done via photos and everything like that, videos, and I didn't have any problem with that. But this show, we came out 2 weeks before the Olympia to Vegas and spent a lot of time together, and I think we tried to change too much when you're there in person versus like seeing it all the time in photos that are the same every time. Now you're seeing something in person, which is maybe different than you see in photos, and you start to do different changes. And this isn't a knock on Patrick. I think Patrick did what he thought was best at the time. But, we were trying to do a million changes to my posing in the last couple of days. We were doing things different with diet that we wouldn't typically do, water and sodium manipulation that we hadn't typically done in the past. That if I had just been sending him photos, we might not have done. But being there in person and me seeing his reactions to my physique, he might have done things differently. And I probably also gauged his reaction to my physique, which might have stressed me out at times. Sure. So it was just a whole different new environment that, after 10 shows doing together, maybe more, Patrick and I had done together, the first time being in person is a whole different environment for us to be working in. Which I don't think was the ideal circumstances for either of us for that high of a level of a show,
Yeah, that makes sense. They always say that don't change anything the last 3-4 weeks. Don't change any foods, don't change any. Just keep on doing what you're doing. You've been running sweet potatoes the whole prep. Don't change to rice. Like
and one thing, like just looking back that in retrospect that I think we could have done to mitigate this was just me keep sending him pictures the same, even if I was seeing him in person, which a lot of guys do. But we were together like 24 hours a day when we were there those 2 weeks. So it just like really never became a thing. But, I think if I'd been sending pictures and he could have compared them to previous ones, just comparing what he was seeing with his naked eye to photos in the past, because a physique in photos and a physique in real life are two very, very different things.
Of course.
He might be making changes that if he looked at in my live physique versus photos, he might not have made because it looks different to him. So over assessing the physique. Which I definitely think, and then me as well, overthinking things as well. So I think it was just a kind of a perfect storm of a few things, the posing, trying to change posing, being there in person, all these kind of things came together. And I still placed 11th in a good lineup there. So I'm not like saying that like, woe is me, that was like a shit, but For me, compared to the previous 2 years, it was definitely like a less than stellar performance from a posing perspective and from a physique and peaking perspective.
Hmm. So leading up to, was it hard for you to kind of make that decision? I know that a ton of bodybuilders, even myself included, where it's just like, oh, I'll just do one more show. Like was it hard or was it a super easy where like you're like, nope, I'm done.
I mean, it's never an easy decision. I mean, bodybuilding is literally all I've done my entire adult life. I started competing at 18, and I like dropped everything when I went into it, I went into it like 120%, and I didn't do anything else. Like I wasn't working other jobs. I started just coaching full time. And then once I was, reasonably into my career, I wasn't even coaching anymore. I was a full-time bodybuilder. So yeah, of course, when you've done something your entire adult life, it's like all you've known in your existence of, how to support yourself, what you do in your day to day, like everything like this. It's a very scary decision that obviously took a lot of thought and a lot of conversations between my wife and I and my family and stuff like that. But I could feel, I wasn't, I didn't have the same passion for it and that I did in years prior. And the last show that I did, Toronto, like was very mentally tough for me. Like I really felt like I was like pushing myself through the motions versus like wanting to be there out of like passion and excitement for like, and even for the basic things of bodybuilding that I always loved for my career before that, which is the training, the diet, like the things that like really challenged myself, even that stuff, I was starting to have a bit of like resentment towards of like, the fuck am I doing with myself here? Which, I think made it tougher and tougher going into that last show. So I think, and even before, like I said, the 22 Olympia, I could kind of see the writing of the wall that like, hey, I think I'm starting to get to that time. And, I've been doing this for 15 years and this is kind of all I've done. Like maybe I want to see what else is out there in the world for me to do while I'm still, youngish. So yeah, it was definitely a very tough decision. And look, it's still a decision that like I fight with every day. Like I had a honeymoon period when I retired of 6 months where I'm like, this is the best decision I ever made. I'm free, and then you're like, shit, I remember why I love that so much. Like once you kind of like settle off it and the pressure's down and you're kind of removed from it a little bit, and then you start to kind of get back to the things in a different setting that drew you to bodybuilding in the first place, like the training and all these things in a different perspective, looking at it in a different light. And then you kind of start to remember like, well, this is why I really love this in the first place. And then obviously you're like, fuck it, I'm getting back on stage, So, I've gone back and forth and had all these thoughts a million times and, yeah, it's a different season of life. And, I'm happy with my decision, and I think it was the right decision at the time. Whether I stick with that decision forever is yet to be decided. I can't tell the future, but I think at the time, for my own sanity and well-being, it was a necessary step.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Allie here actually, she did her first show at 19.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it would have been. I think I started the prep for the show when I was 18. I think when I actually competed, I was 19. So that was 2000, 2010, 9, 10. Yeah. So yeah, I would have been 19 as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I started prep when I was 18 and then obviously I did my show when I was 19. But no, a lot of my friends were like, why would you do this at this age? And I was like, why not?
Yeah.
It's fun. If I love training, why not apply it into competing too? So I wanted to give it a whirl and then I fell in love with it. So
Yeah, for the
yeah.
same reasons that you got into it, Ali, was passion, right? And the same kind of reason that Ian kind of, came out of it was because he kind of lost that fire, that passion. But it's also interesting too that Ian, like once you remove yourself from it and you take the pressure off of yourself when you retire, that
Mhm.
it's interesting that your mind and your body kind of like gravitate you back to it. When you've
Mhm.
removed yourself mentally, you're like, oh, damn, well, the pressure's off, like I can be free and not have high stress levels and not worry about stuff. And maybe I could do that again. And like, it's just interesting psychology of the mind where you're out of it and then you pull yourself out of it and then you maybe want to go back into it. Or when you're younger, like Allie, she wants to just drive. And then your friends are telling you, why are you doing that? When you're
Mhm.
19, I don't even remember what the hell I was doing when I was 19. I sure wasn't focused on bodybuilding and stuff like that. I mean, it was a different world for me back then, but it's cool
Yeah.
that the passion is there at such a young age. I admire that.
Yeah. And I
No,
think that's,
I
sorry to interrupt, something that'll be in my
oh,
life for as long as I live. I mean, that's, I'm going to train and will love training, I think, forever. That's just something that's coded in me. And I think it was, other external factors that made me believe that I didn't love it anymore, but I think it was, a kind of a roundabout way to, that it was disguised amongst that, that it wasn't the reality of like, I don't like this anymore. It's a million other things that were, going in my mind that were making me, a little upset with my circumstances. And that just kind of, made me think that about that. But obviously, like you said, when you get a bit of time and perspective away from it,
Mm.
you kind of get a bit more clarity of like,
Yeah.
okay, this is how I was actually feeling when I'm looking back at it now.
Yeah.
Training and the nutrition was not what I was disliking at the time by any means.
Right. Cool. That's good. That's good stuff right there. I like it. It's good
I
insight.
have a question. So, have you ever had moments where, like, since you were so focused on like bodybuilding, especially at a young age, have you ever had moments where it kind of like jeopardized other aspects of your life, or no?
Yeah, of course. I mean, especially like you said, from a young age. I mean, that's a time where like your social life is such a like a large aspect of your life. Like spending time with your friends and your family, and obviously so many things, especially in the world, are social activities are gathered around food. Like there's the basic things like that, and obviously it can put strain on relationships. Like the first prep I ever did, the girlfriend I had at the time, like that was exited that relationship real quick when I started doing that first show.
Hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
it changes the dynamic of things, and you definitely need to. And it took me a long time to kind of balance, how to manage those things. To still be engaged in my like normal life, but also be the best bodybuilder that I could be.
Mm.
At first I thought I had to be like so stone cold one way, and I think at times you do need to be, but I think there is. And I don't like using this word balance because I think at elite level anything there's not really a balance, but I think there's still like a way, and I think you need that, especially if you want to have like a long career, to not like isolate yourself too much in the sport. I think for like your mental like fortitude over time, that definitely wears on people, when they really like shut themselves off to other things and spend time with their friends and family, and not going to social gatherings and all these kind of things that or hindering their relationships too much. I think over time that does really wear on someone. So as I got older and I'd done this for longer, I did find ways to kind of like manage both in a way that made me feel like as good as I could in both aspects, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Cool.
you still want to be able to enjoy the things you can in life, but then also still be the most successful in what you love doing
Yeah,
too.
like exactly. And I mean, and there is obviously some things that need to be, you know, considered. Like say something like, recreationally. I love snowboarding. When I was a 280-pound bodybuilder, 290
Imagine that.
snowboarding. It's just not worth the risk, If I fall,
Hmm.
I break something. When you're that heavy, you break shit easy. It just wasn't worth that trade-off anymore. So yeah, there's small sacrifices like that of like things that bring you joy that do have to go to the wayside. I mean, you can make the decision to still go snowboard, but when it becomes your full-time job, is it the most responsible choice? And if something does happen, are you going to be really pissed off at yourself that, you made that decision? So you have to weigh those costs for yourself, and those are things that, obviously I had to do over my career. And there's a slew of those that, over 15 years I could probably pick out. But yeah, I mean, it's, you kind of have to weigh those things out, right?
Yeah,
Mm, absolutely.
I had to like senior year in high school, I did track and I ruptured my Achilles and I was like so locked into training and I couldn't even hit legs for 3 months and I was just so sad. I was like, okay, maybe sports isn't my thing now.
Yeah, yeah, no,
So yeah.
I think everyday life is in my business that I do now. I'm in the fire department now, and what we do is we are a risk versus reward analysis every day, every single day. Is this worth it? Is this worth it? Is this worth it? No, the possibilities of what might happen. And yeah, snowboarding when you're 280 and in competing is probably not a good idea.
And so those are the kind of things that, you really need to, consider, especially, once you get to a higher level and,
Right.
there's a lot more things at stake like that, like, you know, from a financial standpoint and all these things as well, it starts to become where everything's a little more serious. So,
Yeah,
um,
no doubt.
So I noticed, when you said, like I'm free,
mhm.
I call it like the ball and chain.
Yeah,
And
unshackled is the word I use. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, like I felt that like when I won, and it was just like I didn't know what I was gonna do, because I just figured it took me so long to win
Mhm.
that I was like, leading up to it, I was like, this is it, I'm done if I win.
Yeah.
And since being free, what are some of the things like what's the most enjoyable thing that you like about it now that you don't have to worry about your qualifiers, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, even things as simple as going snowboarding again. I mean, there's a lot of things of life that I definitely took like a hiatus from initially. Like, when I first retired from bodybuilding, the thing that I hated the most about bodybuilding, especially like was just like being especially in the off season when you get really heavy, is like the volume of food and like that just takes you everywhere. So
Yeah.
when I first retired, that was like the first thing of like, I'm not going to eat at all. So I had like a 6 month period where I was eating like one meal a day. I'm like, what? When I'm hungry. And then, but like over time, like I said, you kind of find your way back to that routine that you found kind of like a sense of peace and semblance in. So, things like that have kind of come full circle back to where I still, follow kind of the same structure in a lot of ways that I did when I was competing. Old habits definitely die hard with bodybuilders.
Yeah.
But things as much as like, getting out and riding my motorcycle more, going on vacation, like, even going on vacations. Like, me and my wife went to Thailand for a few weeks earlier in the year. Like, there's 0% chance I would have done that when I was competing.
Sure.
Each over there, staying in a hotel with the food and the travel and, walking around in the heat all day. I'm like, there's no way I'm doing this. So
Wow.
things like that just became things in my mind that I'm like, this isn't even an option for me at this time. Kind of became all kind of opened back up to me. So I have a lot more time and space for, doing things that I enjoy, but then also, I've kind of come back around to the things that I did enjoy about bodybuilding, which is like, kind of rejuvenated my love for training and the structure that comes along with, the nutrition, these things that, I found my way back to, but in a different capacity.
That
Gotcha.
makes sense. Yeah. So how was Thailand?
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would highly recommend it. Yes.
It's on our list for sure.
It was great.
Okay.
Mm.
That's
I
awesome.
have a question. So you talked about right away not wanting to eat and going down to one meal a day.
Mhm.
My last prep last year, I kind of had the same experience where my head wasn't in it. I didn't know why I was doing it. I got on stage. I wasn't happy with my presentation. I wasn't happy with how I looked. I knew I was off.
Mhm.
And it was a pretty disappointing experience. And then after I was like, I'm done. I think this is it. But how was the transition for you? Because I'm finding it really hard to let go of a certain aesthetic that I feel I have to that that you felt you had to look a certain way still.
Cut out there for a second, just that last sentence.
Oh, did you feel the pressure of having to maintain a certain aesthetic or I've got to do cardio because I got to keep my body fat at a certain percentage? Like I can't get rid of that piece.
Yeah, no, I personally didn't, but I also understand like being an open men's bodybuilder versus being a female competitor, I think is very different. Uh,
Mhm.
I think for me, there is like a pride in a bodybuilder in just being big and not necessarily like being super lean in a lot of ways. It's not something that like I think, I gravitated to in the same sense that like say my wife did when she retired or even still does today. She was
Mhm.
an Olympia level figure competitor as well. And
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
that's still something that she struggles with even to this day is but it's a very different thing I think that most females fight with than men as a whole. But it's definitely something, especially competitors, when you change that standard for yourself or have seen what you can look like at a certain time, and obviously it shifts that goalpost in your head of and you're like, man, I look good and I worked so hard to get here, like I want to keep doing these, and it almost becomes like an obsession, where you start cutting back the food more and doing more cardio, and then you're limiting your progress from this whole cycle to try and maintain something that isn't supposed to be maintained in the first place.
Mm.
So it's
So
definitely,
true.
and I think when I think the biggest thing that I found, especially for myself, and I really leaned into like, where am I making the most progress? And like I was such like a progress results driven individual that, when I knew by doing that, I was limiting myself in like what I was able to accomplish in my career, even after retiring from bodybuilding. I think after retiring from bodybuilding was a little different in the sense because I really wanted to have a body that was like smaller and more capable of doing the things in my life that I wanted to do. So like
Mm.
losing a bit of what I had accomplished in bodybuilding wasn't like super worrisome to me. Where in some senses I can definitely understand it being for you. But like I wanted to do things like, like I said, go to Thailand, walk around 6 hours a day and not be like, oh my God, I'm dying here. And, that, or, if I want to sit on my motorcycle for hours, or if I want to, go snowboarding where I'm like, it gets hard when you're heavy, or even if I want to go run, like stuff like that I hadn't done in 15 years because I had a body that was like so created for like one thing and one thing only that really had no like practical use in anything else other than the gym. So that did make it a little easier for me in retirement. But during my career, I definitely would understand what you're saying. Yeah.
Obviously you've seen a lot of changes in the sport now, within the NPC, the IFBB. Was there anything within the sport that kind of pushed you away from competing that kind of added to like some of the reasons or not really?
Nothing like, obviously the biggest change that I encountered kind of throughout my career was, the introduction of like social media's prevalence in bodybuilding. Like when I started competing, like Instagram didn't even exist yet. So, like I'm from the magazine, like one of the first contracts I ever got was a Flex magazine contract. So like
Mm.
they don't even exist anymore. So,
Yeah.
that was kind of where it was. Social media, it wasn't like really what dictates your value in bodybuilding in the same sense that it does now, which I don't think is a bad thing. And I think a lot of ways it's giving people a lot more opportunities. And, even if you're not a guy at the top, you can make a really, really good living if you like hustle hard on your social media stuff. But it was definitely the most dramatic change from like the first few years of my career to like, adjusting to that later in my bodybuilding career, when I had contracts that were of, some significant value, and there's different pressures that aren't just competitive pressures. Now, these are, pressures from a, metric standpoint in the world of these companies. Right. So, that's definitely probably the biggest change that, has negative things too, because obviously bodybuilding is it's something you work to build on your own body. And that's also something that's so judged and subjective. So you're putting yourself out there in like different capacity. Like, like you play a sport like soccer and you have a bad game, it's one thing, but like, and I understand that's your body of work, but it's not like literally what you carry around all day and how you literally look like, where
Yeah.
it's judged. So there's similarities, but there's also very stark differences in how it affects your mind. So, I definitely see that, in bodybuilding. Probably one of the things I think I noticed gets at pro bodybuilders or pro competitors or amateurs even probably the most is like social commentary,
Yeah.
which you weren't exposed to in the same way 15 years ago. You
Yeah.
wouldn't get opinions of anybody other than really the judges or your friends or family. You get feedback after the show. There'd be some articles in the magazine with some photos a few weeks later, or whatever, but you wouldn't hear the opinions of the people reading the magazines, like, or now it's like you have 600 million people like online that are shouting their opinions at you, which obviously, for some people and myself at times, I mean, I definitely have had those moments. It can become tough to manage, especially because, like I said, to make a very successful career in bodybuilding now, you do have to be quite intertwined in that social world, where say someone like, playing in the NBA, you can have someone run your social media and you're making, crazy amount of money from your contracts and stuff that aren't you actually engaging into that world. Where bodybuilding, you have to be a little more engaged in that world, right? In the fitness world. So it's definitely probably the biggest change and thing that I like and dislike in my career.
So I got a follow up to that. Correct me if I'm wrong. There was a point, and I don't remember exactly when it was, but there was a point in time where I think you shut your social media down
Mhm.
because there was a lot of criticism and a lot of bullshit running around, and people were talking shit and everything else. And I remember you had shut your social media down for a bit. So can you touch on that for just a second? See what
Yeah,
happened?
that was actually it was an interesting scenario because it was really my first. So this was when I won the New York Pro in 2020.
That's right. Yep. I remember.
And I had come across. I understand bodybuilding is a subjective sport, and I'm completely fine with criticism. But it was such a new scenario for me, where I'd accomplished like the biggest pinnacle of my career thus far by winning the New York Pro, and
Mm.
I got the most negative feedback, and I was so confused by it at the time. It's like, I was coming fourth at shows, and people were like loving me, and now I win the biggest show, and everyone hates me, and I was like so confused by it.
Makes no
So
sense.
kind of introduction to that, which obviously now, like as I matured and kind of like looked at things with a bit of like more perspective and being like, well, yeah, the more you're beating other guys that have a social presence and the more you're in the spotlight,
Mm.
obviously the more of everything they'll be, negative and positive.
Yeah.
But our minds obviously have the affinity to kind of gravitate only to the negative. There can be 60,000 positive things and 15 negative things, and you're like, everyone hates me, and you're like, is that really the reality of like of how things are going?
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that was definitely a learning moment for me. I got all this, like what I felt at the time was a lot of negative commentary, which if I was probably to look back now was probably like 1% or less of it actually talked about it or viewed it online. Probably like a quarter percent.
Yeah.
Uh, but it was such a strange thing because I didn't know how to handle, like I was so happy with what had just happened, and then like I wanted it to be like, felt that I want to feel that same energy from the external, and I got the opposite. It felt like
Yeah.
confused me, to
Yeah.
be honest. So I took I think like a week or two,
I remember that.
know, just time away from that to like kind of being like, okay, what are you really feeling here? Like, get your head Olympia, and the rest of my career being on social media is something I need to tackle and to deal with. My internet's okay.
Yeah. It cut out for 1 second. You're good.
Yeah, it just showed me it's unstable, but I think we're good. So it was something that I kind of had to, really learn, to handle in a different capacity, and like, know why I was feeling that about that commentary, and kind of
Yeah.
figure out how to manage it before I put myself back in that position,
Yeah.
which I did very quickly, and then kind of went on with my career. But it was definitely a big learning moment for me for sure.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks for the insight. It's cool.
Yeah, speaking of moments, what would you say is like your best moment of your competitive career? I know there's probably a lot.
Yeah, I have a couple different answers to it. One that like immediately stands out in my mind, probably, it's in terms of accomplishments in my career, it's not the biggest one, but it was just like such a good moment for me. In 2021, I had a really good season. Like that was definitely my best season by far. I went and I won Tampa Pro, and
I was
then
there for that. Yeah. I saw you there.
I won
Awesome.
Tampa, and then kind of as a last minute decision, Texas was the next weekend, and I knew Steve Kuklo was doing, Texas, so I was like, you know what, going into the Olympia might be really nice to kind of see how I stack up to a guy who had placed kind of in that 6, 7, 8 range at the Olympia before, and see where I fall, and I didn't really have any expectations. I wasn't like, I'm going to go in there and crush Steve. I just really didn't think too much about it. I'm like, look, I already got my Olympia qualification. I was really happy with how I looked in Tampa. Let's just go throw my hat in the ring here, and see what we can do. Um, and I also knew it was Steve's kind of home court in Texas, and he's the Texas boy and the favorite there. So, not that I think that influences judging, but I knew like I was definitely going to have the crowd against me in a capacity. So,
Mm.
uh, and I kind of went in there 1 week after Tampa and won that show against Steve in like home court. And I remember that being like probably the most like monumental swing I think in my career, and like my stock as a bodybuilder. I hadn't beaten anyone of that caliber yet in my career, and to do it like back to back weeks, winning big shows like Tampa and Texas are some of the premier shows, especially that year they were.
Yeah.
To win back to back shows and beat someone of Steve's caliber, and then even just like not long after that, then I went to the Arnold, became second, which was like a pretty exciting stint of a few months of my career there. So, I would put that Tampa, Texas 2 weeks probably as like personally the most memorable and meaningful, and like most exciting for me personally. But there's also no feeling like that first Olympia when you hear yourself called like the middle of the second call out, and you're compared with some of those guys in those groups at the front. You know, like you called in the second call and you move to the middle and you're like, holy shit, I'm like 6, 7, 8 here. Like, what the fuck's going on? You know?
That's cool.
And I remember distinctly too, because I had competed earlier that year or the year prior, maybe. No, yeah, earlier that year before New York. I did Tampa Pro against Hunter Labrada. I had a terrible showing, and I came second to Hunter there. And I remember that was like my whole goal for the Olympia was like just beat Hunter, you know, personally, you know. So I was like, I just got to beat Hunter, you know. So, and I remember going. So they obviously announced the top 5 on stage, right? But like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you kind of like are waiting for the results after. You know, I didn't really know where I'd placed yet. I knew me and Hunter were kind of splitting center in that second call out. And I remember getting off stage and I just like went and found Tyler Mannion as fast as I could. I'm like, you have to tell me, did I beat Hunter? He's like, yeah, you were 17th. And I was like, I remember the feeling of like just straight euphoria. I'm like, fuck yes, you know? Placed as high as I ever dreamed to place at that show, you know, and beat someone that obviously, you know, I had a bit of a bone to pick with after. Anyway, Hunter's a good friend of mine, so you know, after that Texas or the Tampa, I wanted a bit of like vengeance after like having a really bad showing and felt like I was kind of like this guy. I think this guy thinks that I'm this shitty. Like I got to come back and prove him that I'm a better than this, you know. So, you know, it was a kind of a double whammy of like, you know, placing that high and, you know, kind of the whole feeling around that was really exciting for me for sure. Yeah.
I got a question for you. So I'm going to try to shift gears a little bit. Chris and I talked about it a little bit. I wanted to ask you, you know, a lot of guys, bodybuilders, they have funny moments in their career. They have moments that stand out where they get, you know, a lot of notoriety on social media, right? My example for that was Guy Sister Nino, right? When he was when he was on the hack squat, you know, and he's like, "Not in front of me, bro, not in front of me, bro." You know, that whole scenario, right? That was hilarious. I mean, and that took off, and it was like it exploded. It became T-shirts and all kinds of shit like that. It was hilarious. But you ever have any type of stuff like that where you like just something happened in the gym or in life where you know, wherever that was just like one of those crazy funny moments that took off on you?
Nothing that comes to immediate mind. Like, you know, I have some moments of like, you know, things that I remember that I was like, I kind of fucked up here or something, you know, like I remember one and it ended up making me look so guilty, but like I wasn't lying in the time was I don't remember if you guys remember when me and Chris Bumstead split part like coaching.
Sure.
You know?
Sure.
And I had done this live podcast with Fuad and them in New York somewhere. And I and I announced that we weren't going to be working together anymore at this like private event. And then he hadn't decided yet who he was going to be working with. You know, there was some options on the table, and I kind of said that at this private event, and, you know, that he had talked to Patrick Tour because I was working with him. You know, he had talked to Hill, he had talked to Hani, a few guys. And then, you know, one of these channels went and ran with saying Chris is working with Hani. And I was like, okay, yeah, I didn't say that. He's not, blah, blah, blah. Like months later, he ends up working with Hani. Everyone's like, see, he was lying. I'm like, fuck, no, I wasn't. I swear I didn't know. You just got really lucky in a 33% chance guess on that one, you know? So, yeah, that one I remember. And I felt so bad for Chris, too, because I'm like, fuck, man, I shouldn't have said anything at this podcast. I didn't think it would get out here. Someone would say to some page and it gets all over the internet, you know? But I remember that one being like where I'm sitting there to Chris, I'm like, fuck, man, I'm so sorry. And now he's got a million pages tagging him in stories about him working with Hani. And he hadn't even talked to Hani yet at this point, which was funny. So then Hani is, you know, getting his number through other people and calling him and being like, hey, what the fuck is this? Or apparently we're together. Like, and Chris, so sorry. Like, you know, so mortified, embarrassed that this whole situation is happening. So that one definitely stands out as like, you know, funny now in retrospect that like, you know, I don't really give a shit and things all work out. It's all fun now. But at the time, like so anxious and embarrassed about like this situation that I felt responsible for unfolding.
That's funny.
You know, going back just a hair, I remember you got such backlash for wanting to do Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember you said, like, I am a bodybuilder. Like, this is my profession, you know? And I just thought it was so ridiculous because it's like, you just won. Why wouldn't you go? Like, this is how you make money.
It's a crazy thing. And I've never understood this. And like, you know, you see this with, You know, like Ashley Kaltwasser used to get this a lot, you know, when she would go win like 20 of the 50 shows of the season, you know. And it's crazy to me to ever get upset with a professional athlete for doing their job, you know, like
Crazy.
especially when there's like monetary gain to be had. You know, if it was all we gained from it was just the Olympia qualification, I might understand a little more. I still wouldn't understand because there's still the accolades that go along with it that are yours forever, you know? So
Yeah.
you can't really make a good case for it. But let's say there was no money. Okay, whatever. But the fact is there is. So like you're talking about now saying to someone that you shouldn't make your living doing what you do. Like I trained to be this, and now you're saying, oh, I should give other opportunities to people to win money. Like, why would I give them opportunities? If the opportunity's out there for all of us, I want to win it. You know, like how I go out there and compete for accolades like everybody else is. You know, so I definitely had times where I was like, you know what? Sometimes I just want to compete in every fucking show of the season, and
No doubt.
just be like, fuck all of you. You know?
Yeah. It's like, hey, this is my job. This is my job. It's like some people work all year for $50,000 a year, right? You know what I mean? If you're out there and you're like, you just killed a show and you come back next week and you got another show, I'm like, hey, I'm gonna go try and get that 50K, and I'm gonna go out and the next week I'm gonna go try and get that 50K too. And there's nobody's gonna take my job. This is what I do. This is what I'm prepped for. And I remember that too, Chris, when you got a lot of flack for that, Ian. And I liked the commentary that you put out there to everybody. You were like, dude, I'm a professional bodybuilder. I'm not taking a backseat to anybody, and I'm going to go get this money. And I was like, yeah, all right, I respected that a lot. That's cool.
I would never fault any bodybuilder or any athlete of any kind that works hard for their career to ever have that, you know, like faulting someone for going out there and like being passionate and aggressive in their career, I think is only something we should admire. We should never like look at someone down from that, you know. And I think it mostly comes from uninformed fans that like want their favorite bodybuilders to get a chance to get. It's like, okay, sure, but like even in the sense of saying like, you know, with that, like even like I said before, if there was no money on it, like when I retire from bodybuilding, like that money will, you know, the little bits that I won for these shows, that's long gone. And these accolades that I won in bodybuilding, like the pro wins and the trophies, like how my name will be remembered and eternalized in bodybuilding is all I really have of it, you know? So if I put that on the back burner so that like fucking buddy down the street that I compete against can go win these accolades, like what am I doing this for?
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Titles. I want the more New York pro rings. I want more swords and trophies and titles in record books that, you know, when I go 15, 20, 30, 40 years from now, I'd be like, yeah, I won 6, 10, 15, 20 professional titles, you know? Like think actually like, you know, in that essence, like those shows she won, especially in pro bikini, she ain't winning shit. Like she's won like 2, 3 grand, like shows, you know? So like it's, yeah, you're getting one, a bit of a payday. So she needs to do a lot of them. But two, she also now is historically will be for a long time, which I think is going to be very hard to beat, the most winning pro ever. And if she's like, oh, well, I want to give other people opportunities, she would never have that accolade to her name. And I think trying to do that to be like fair to other competitors is just like mind boggling to me.
Yeah,
you know?
fuck that. I wouldn't do that either. I wouldn't do it either.
And look, and I would, and to be clear, I would also never fault a bodybuilder. Look, 2019, I didn't make it to the Olympia. After I made it in 2018, I won the Spain Pro. 2019, I lost out from the Olympia because they still had the point system.
Yeah.
Right.
So I lost out in a double whammy that I did the Tampa Pro that year. Dexter Jackson, who was already qualified for the Olympia, did the show. And then Luke Sandow, who was also qualified for the Olympia, both beat me at that show. So two guys already qualified beat me at that show, and that kept me out of the Olympia because I didn't get enough points, and I also didn't win the show.
That's right.
So they'd also done other shows that year, and you know, they were already like there was a whole bunch of other things, and like I never fault these guys for like. I mean, it's like, yeah, good for you. You got out there and you know did what you're supposed to do as a professional bodybuilder. You know,
you're supposed to compete.
You should have let me win. Like you know, it's like I already qualified, get a chance. It's like they're going to beat me at the Olympia anyway. So like, what the fuck does it matter anyways? You know, like
it's a fair point.
I'll admit I've definitely been guilty. Like when I did Texas Pro and I knew Jessica was doing it, I was like, just write the check out to Jessica, okay? Like the list is out, just write her check. I think she's an amazing competitor. She's very
before where I knew there was guys I'm not going to beat, and it's a hard thing to try to have those thoughts sometimes. But I mean, at the end of the day, you're all professional competitors trying to beat each other, and that's kind of the name of the game, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You're there to win. You're there to fucking win. That's it.
Well, the thing is, like, if you don't want me to win, beat me. Like, if you want me to give you a chance, well, then you have to be better than me to beat me to win it. Like, it's
Correct.
not my prerogative to let you win. It's your prerogative to beat me. Like,
I agree.
the ball is in your court. Like,
Yeah.
hey, if you beat me and the judges think it's then you'll win the money and you'll win the title. It's all yours. You just have to, So
Yeah. Great mindset. So it's the right mindset. I like it. It's a good mindset for sure.
the opportunity is there for you, the same as me. We have the same opportunity to show up at the show and try and win it. I just beat you. That's on you, not on me. So,
Yeah, I agree.
Do you feel like you made the most out of your competitive bodybuilding phase?
pardon?
Do you feel like you made the most out of your competitive bodybuilding part of your life?
Yes and no. I mean, I definitely think I still, if I understand your question right, like I
Mm.
still I have or had more time in me to be a very good competitive bodybuilder. I
Mhm.
retired pretty young, so like in terms of getting more out of it, do I think I could have competed a few more years and won more titles and got to more Olympias and got more top 10 placings? Yeah, 100% I do. I mean, I retired winning a show. Like I
Right.
didn't retire because I like, oh my god, like now I'm starting to slip. Like I hadn't lost a regular season show since 2020. Like in 4 years, every single show I'd done, doing at least 2 shows a year, for between those 3-4 years, I won every single one of them. So it's not like I was having a stark decline in my career, and
Mhm.
even Olympia in 22, where I did have a bad showing, I only placed like 4 places lower. It's not like I dropped from 7th to 20th, you know what I mean? In a
Mhm.
Mhm.
better lineup than the ones I come 7th. So, how much of a change is it really? It's negligible. So do I think I was getting better at that point in my career? No, I think I was definitely like starting to get slightly worse year to year. But do I think I still could have been a competitive bodybuilder and done, better than or continued to do well at that point? I definitely think I could have. So
Yeah.
that's not something I like look back of as like coulda, shoulda, woulda. It's like I made the decision, but there's always thoughts throughout your career of like, I should have done this or I should have done this, or like, I only ever did one Arnold Classic, and I was like, man, I should have done more of those because the one time I did do it, I came fucking second. Like, why didn't I do more of this?
Mhm.
So, there's obviously thoughts in your mind of like things that you could have done, but I'm also very happy with like how my career kind of transpired. And I have a lot of kind of accolades to my name that I'm very proud of. So, I think things can only happen how they happen. Maybe if I'd done something different, done one more Arnold one year, I might not have won different shows and I might have done this and, all things could have
Mhm.
changed. So it's like, I try not to dwell on it. So no, I mean, there's definitely things that I could have done differently after, like at the end, I think I could have competed longer. And maybe I
Mhm.
still will, who knows? But, I definitely, am overall, pretty content with kind of how things transpired in my bodybuilding career for sure.
Yeah. You have quite the hell of a resume and career that's for sure.
Yeah, I'm holding on for dear life with having the most pro wins as a Canadian bodybuilder. So I know it's not forever, so I'll keep milking it for as many years as I still got.
Take what you can get.
One of
Mhm.
these days, one of these guys like Quinton or Regan or someone's eventually going to get it if they compete long enough. Uh,
Mm.
but who knows? I got 6 pro wins, and I'll ride that into the sunset every day that I can.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, I signed on to your new app, Fitnetic. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, this is just life after bodybuilding. I find kind of new avenues to do different things, and um, I was kind of looking to build something to, give a little more access. Like, I don't have the time or want to do like full-time coaching at this point in my life, which is something I used to do early in my career. So, I want to kind of give an option for people that's obviously a lot more cost effective than hiring a full-time coach. And maybe there's someone that's not at that level, to give them something that's, designed by me and get their hands on something, that I worked on, that can make them feel a little more confident in the gym with their nutrition. So yeah, it's just a fun little project that I've worked on for the last few months. And, we're still working on it now. I mean, we got it out there and people get on it and start trying it out. But it's been a fun, fun, but, nerve like building tech products is definitely not something I'm looking to venture in anymore after this. you know like these things are an absolute fucking nightmare to deal with. You know, it's like just bug fix after bug fix after this after this. It's one thing's not working. This that you know what I mean. It's like versus like just dealing with someone one on one where you can problem solve yourself. It's like all this tech nonsense is just like not for me. But no, it's been good, and I look forward to the future of the product, and to continue to build on it and give people a really good product to help them with their training and nutrition. So yeah, it's been fun though.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, just the brief time I spent on it, it's like really in depth. So that's something like that's different from other apps.
And then one thing where we're really big on, especially because the product is so new, is we want like people's feedback on it, and that's where I think we're going to make this a really good product. Is like we want people to get on there and be like brutally honest with it and tell us what features you'd like to see and what things you're noticing that, hey, this is what I'm noticing. I would like this, if this isn't working or whatever it is. Like every little thing that people see on there, we want to keep making this better and better so that like everybody can find kind of what they want on it. So I don't think we're coming into this like selling this as like this is the perfect product, buy it and you'll be, look, I'm very happy with what we've created and I think we're at a great spot. But I also want this to be something that people feel involved with. And I think that's one thing that I've kind of had and maintained throughout a lot of my bodybuilding careers, like having pretty hands-on with a lot of my fan base. Like I respond to like almost literally everybody that DMs me on Instagram, and I have for almost the entire time I've been in social media. And like I'll have random kids message me on Instagram, and be like, "Hey, I'd love to come out for work," and I'm like, "Sure, I'm down." Like I don't care. And I like that. I like being engaged with like the people that have supported me in my career, and I'm a pretty social person, so like I enjoy these things as well. So I really want to kind of like take advantage of that community aspect I built in my career with this app, and kind of have everybody kind of do it as a collaborative effort and give me their opinions and give me their feedback and give me features they'd like, and like let's build the app that all of us like together. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible, man, about the DMs too, because I can tell you most pros are not doing that or not responding, or if they are, it's not really them, it's their, assistant or, you know.
Like I like talking to people. I mean, as you can see on here, I could talk forever on one topic. So, um, I like going to an expo and working a 8 hour day at a booth with talking to people all day is not something that I'm like I ever dread or gets exhausting for me. Or at the gym, even when I'd be 2 weeks out from a bodybuilding show, if someone came up to me in the middle of my workout, I would spend like 10 minutes talking to them. I won't care if I like 10 minutes between sets. I don't care, like I'd rather just have a conversation, engage with these people. And, I also know like when I was and starting into bodybuilding, how much that like would have meant to me, like if I'd run into like a guy that, I looked up to or that I was a fan of in bodybuilding, and they like spent the time to like talk to me or help me with, my like someone messaged me on Instagram and has a question about their training or their nutrition or wants me to look at a few poses and ask how they could fix it. I'm like, I'd love to, because I know if I messaged, whatever the equivalent of me would have been when I was starting, Gustavo Bedell, I don't know who the fuck I would have been.
Yeah.
Some guy like that in 2005, how much that would have meant to me at the time, so when I look at it like kind of from that like roundabout perspective like that, I think it can be really meaningful to people that like have that kind of, like to me, I just think I'm a normal person, but I think to these people, my input on these topics is very highly valued. So, I like to give them as much as I can. I think we got to share the wealth of knowledge that we all have kind of compiled amongst us. And, I think it just makes us all better bodybuilders and better people,
100%.
Yeah, super respectable. I mean, I remember too, like me and Stephanie are in your line, we waited the 10, 15 minutes, and I'm going up to meet you for the first time. Before I can get a word out, you're like, "Hey, Chris." And I was like, "Me?" Like, holy shit. I mean, with all the thousands of, DMs you must have get, we were just kind of blown away.
Yeah, no, I love people, man. Like it's something that I think I didn't know how much, like I would have probably considered myself more of like an introvert before or early in my bodybuilding career. But I think honestly, getting more in the spotlight, meeting more people and people having more access to me, like made me realize that I'm really not. I don't get like I said, like socially exhausted or have a social battery that easily drains. And, I like talking to people and helping people. And, that's something that brings me like a lot of like personal joy is like, that kind of, giving back in a sense to the bodybuilding community like that.
I
Yeah.
love it. It's awesome.
That's awesome. Mhm.
So let's talk about something a little more prominent in today's bodybuilding world. What do you see going on right now with the top 4 or 5 guys? How do you see it shaping up going into October?
Yeah, I think Samson's the guy to beat right now, and I think it's going to be tough for anyone to knock him off. You know, I I think Arnold is going to be a very interesting kind of depiction of this. With Derek working with a new coach
Yeah.
and just having lost to Samson and having beat Samson the year before that,
Right.
I think this is going to be kind of like our first. Drawing the line in the sand of like, can Derek regain this, or is this Samson kind of separating himself from the pack?
Right.
Which
And no Hottie at the Arnold too.
Yeah, and I kind of think the latter. I think that Samson's going to start pulling away.
Mm.
Um, I think that's just a physique that's going to be really hard for people to compete with. So I expect him to, become more and more dominant over like the next year or two. And then I expect those like guys kind of under there, the 3-4-5, 2-3-4-5-6, to kind of like interchange a lot between
Yeah.
there. Body is still kind of a pretty strong second best bodybuilder in the world. And if it was going to beat Samson, I think it would be Hottie. I think he's still, but Father Time is definitely not on Hottie's side in the way it is. Samson's an older guy too for a pro bodybuilder, but his like life in the game is a lot shorter. Like he started a little later in life, and I don't think it's necessarily your age. I think it's your mileage. I think sometimes they correlate and sometimes they don't. If you start at 16, well, yeah, going to 35 is a long career. If you start at 30, well, 38 isn't a long career. So I think mileage is really what gets guys. So.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a lot of like interesting storylines. I mean, like, Martin obviously made a big splash at the Olympia last year.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited to see what he does this year. And it's going to be very exciting to see him and Nick compete against each other in like Pittsburgh and New York and those kind of shows, because like obviously Nick has had a rough last 2 seasons, and he did still beat Martin last year, but Martin's leveled up a lot now. And, for Martin to beat Nick would be like a really big milestone in his career and really be, kind of changing the guard there for someone that has been as high as third at the Olympia, won an Arnold Classic like Nick has.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a really exciting storyline there. But I think Samson's probably the guy that everyone's going to be chasing for the next little while for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
Are you going to the Arnold?
Yeah, I'll be at the Arnold. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I get on the Thursday on the 27th or whatever that is. And I got a couple of booths to work. I mean, pretty much all the companies I'm with are at the Arnold. So I have a extremely long schedule, which is good and bad. It's, you want some time to go like enjoy all the other things and go train with guys and do all this stuff. But like I said, I also enjoy being at the expos and like talking to people and shooting the shit and hanging around. So it's good. I mean, I'll be there. Yeah, pretty much the whole weekend at whether it's Raw or Gym Reapers or Elevate or one of these, I'll be kind of around there the whole time. So
Cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What do you think about Keown staying in the 212? Do you think it's a mistake, or do you think he should just go for the Sandow, this year?
No, I think he's doing the right thing. Like, look, I can see both sides. The thing is, I don't think he's going to win. Look, I do think pound for pound, he is probably the best bodybuilder on the planet right now.
Yeah.
I think if you compare it picture to picture, I think he is better. But you also have to remember, Samson is like 285 pounds,
Right.
And this
Right.
isn't like 1999 where like size is judged in the kind of way where guys like Lee Priest and Sean Ray can compete against Dorian. Like it's not the same anymore.
Yes.
That's why they made the 212. So because it isn't the same anymore,
Yeah. Yeah.
But guys like Derek and guys like Hottie have proved that these 212 guys can be a force in the open, definitely can be. I think that is maybe a natural progression for him at some point.
Mm-hmm.
But I think to create a title legacy in 212 first would probably be the way I would go. Like 2 in a row now. Why might we not make that 4 or 5? Or how many did Flex win? 7, 6, 8? I don't know.
Yeah, it was 7.
Like try and chase a title like that. Okay, now you're in your mid 30s. You got 7 titles. All right, let's take a shot or two at the Open. When I've got more muscle on me, and I've got all the accolades I could ever dream of in the 212, and I've kind of created a legacy there that'll live on. And then I'll give it a shot in the Open and kind of see where I can fall. Right.
I used to train back at Bev Francis Powerhouse when I lived in New York, and obviously Steve was there every single day. And I competed a few times with Steve as my judge, and I just always remember one phrase that he would always say about smaller guys going against bigger guys. He would always say, "It's still bodybuilding. It's the biggest body on the stage. You got to be bodybuilder." So
Yep.
he would always say it's about the bigger guy. If the proportions are there, he's going to beat the little guy every single time just because there's more muscle there. That's what it's all about.
Like, and you have to look at the champion that we have right now too. Like, if we had some like uber unesthetic guy in the Olympia seat right now, then maybe you could make a conversation for them wanting something different with the aesthetics of Keon. But like Samson, as good as it's going to get for aesthetics in a men's open guy, like that's just like a 6 foot tall, beautiful 280-pound physique, So, and like it's very evident what you said too, because like prime example is Martin and Chris Bumstead in Prague this year. Like. Sure. There's a lot of things that Chris had that were superior to Martin in that show. And I was there in person, and when you really look at it, it's like, yeah, okay, Chris had really great detail. His posing is excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Conditioning was amazing. And Martin was a little bit off on the first day. And there was a lot of things that in a lot of criteria that he did have better than Martin, but Martin was still just bigger. He has a lot more muscle. He's about the same weight and he's 6 inches shorter.
Yeah.
He's still really good in a lot of the other criteria.
Yeah.
Steve judge there, and that's kind of what he said is like still bodybuilding, man. And I don't disagree. And I think you need to be clear, careful and clear with blurring the lines of where we're trying to dictate these classes of like, what are we setting the precedent here for? Where is the line between classic and bodybuilding, or 212 and bodybuilding, or 212 and classic, or between these classes? If we're just going to put aesthetics over everything, are we going to put condition over everything? Well, they all kind of have their place now, and we have kind of a class for all of them.
Yeah.
Or aesthetics is king in classic. I would say like aesthetics, then conditioning, then muscularity. But then you go bodybuilding, okay, the arrangement's a little different now, where muscularity is king, with aesthetics and conditioning being kind of close after that, right? So, and those kind of flop around based on the era you're looking at. In early 2000s, aesthetics didn't matter at all, and then it's kind of changed.
Didn't at all.
It kind of things kind of flop around with who is at the top and what you're chasing, So yeah, it's but yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, bodybuilding is bodybuilding, and you got to be big, right?
It's true.
What do you think of the new fit division?
Come on, do we really have to go there?
I don't have enough of an opinion formed of it yet to judgment. I haven't really even seen. I saw a few pictures, I think, of maybe the first NPC show that they did, and it kind of just looked like amateur bikini from 10 years ago. So I don't really know. But I also know with all these classes, there's a little bit of growing pains, and things kind of take time to kind of like girls to find where, the physique that they're doing, the judges to kind of, weed out what they're looking for. And you can only also judge what's in front of you. So like if there isn't the perfect physique that you think is fit model in front of you, then people start to think that even though they're winning, this is what they're looking for. And it's not necessarily, it's just they haven't been given the right physique yet to really, really elevate in the class. So, but I mean, you look at how much all these classes have changed over time. I mean, like, think of Danny Hester winning classic, or like, or like, some of these guys at the beginning of men's physique, that were winning at the beginning, like Mark Anthony, look like then compared to what the guys look like now, and how the things kind of they kind of go one way, and then they like, okay, no, we kind of lost our way, and then they kind of redirect and kind of find their balance of like what they're really looking for in the class. And I think that takes time with all these. So I think in time it'll find its place, but I also think it's getting tough with the women's divisions, because there is like 15 fucking women's divisions now. So lines get blurred a little bit, especially between like fit model to bikini to wellness, like, and then you kind of, it gets in there. I'm all for giving more opportunities for people to compete and more sources to generate revenue into our sport. I think more people competing, more people getting on stage, more people, all this bringing money into the sport is good for everybody. I don't think that hurts at us in any way at all. But I think that they need to be very clear on what they're looking for in the class, and not blur the lines, because we have seen that in previous years, where, like there was years where like maybe figure and physique were getting a little close, and then maybe physique and bodybuilding were getting a little close, and then wellness and bikini. It's like, you kind of like, and they kind of level out, like I said, over time. But I think, that's the biggest thing, is just really setting the precedent with judging. But like I said, you can only judge what's in front of you. So it's no fault of the judges. They might just not have seen the right physiques yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's
Like,
kind of crazy to.
experience that, like the changes in women's figure. Like you look at Nicole Wilkins
Yeah.
to like a Jessica Padilla.
Yeah. I know. Yeah, no, it's the changes are crazy. I mean, and it's all across the board. Obviously bodybuilding's been around a lot longer, so it's kind of transformation was a lot more gradual from like the 70s to 80s to 90s, where like in a lot of the other classes it happens so fast, like, in a matter of 5 to 8 years, like the development and conditioning and the standard in some of these classes can change so dramatically. So yeah, but like I said, it's also tough. And I do empathize with the judges sometimes, because sometimes even though they don't have things that are necessarily the best, they're still the best. So like you might get a girl that is too muscular, or maybe is a little too lean in certain ways, but she does have like fantastic shape that really fits the figure in a lot of ways. So then it's like, and then you end up rewarding this person, and then everything kind of slews to people to chase that. And then you get this weird, like where, everything ends up kind of off base a little bit, and, the class goes down. Like, and men's physique kind of did this for a while too, even, and I think they've corrected back down a little bit now. And, guys like Ryan Terry winning Olympia is obviously very evident of that. But at the end of the day, when you still look like, even in figure, with someone like Sid Gillian winning, like the standard is still where the standard is. Like that's that right. We all want figure to be in some way. Like, yeah, obviously these cartoon, black girls with these crazy aesthetics are insanely hard to compete with, like that's something that makes it really, really hard from a genetic standpoint to compete with. But that's just like the unfortunate nature in a lot of ways of bodybuilding as a sport, is genetics are king. But, when you look at her aesthetics, she isn't overly muscular. She isn't overly conditioned, and kind of what I think a lot of us picture figure to be. But then, yeah, like your next to that is Jessica Reyes, which is like a very different thing. So it's tough as a judge. I definitely feel for them. And, when you get these slew of physiques and there's so much variance, but like there is some things that are really valued in that class in something, but then also parts of the physique that really aren't. And you're like, well, do I completely unreward them for these things? Or like, where do you kind of draw the line? It gets very tricky,
Yeah. Yeah. It's about the standard, finding the standard and then sticking to it is the most difficult part. And then, like you said, they stray off of it. Then they kind of got to realign everything and introduce another class. And so it's a constant progression, and it's a constant, like everything else in life, it's always changing. So you got to adapt.
Yeah. But like you said, I mean, you look at like Nicole would be like small and under conditioned for a bikini girl by today's standards.
Right.
It's changed so much. And, and I know that's partly, why my wife got out of competing, is like she started competing because of Nicole and Aaron Stern and like these girls like that at that time, and like in the early 2000s. And that was kind of the physique she liked. And when she found it was like kind of getting away from that, she's like, man, I'm good. It's tough sometimes to see the physiques changing in a way that you might necessarily not agree with, but then like also have so much passion for the division in the sport. It gets tricky, right?
Yeah.
What was the first pro show you ever went to? Like, or was it your pro show?
No, the first pro show I ever went to was, I actually have kind of a funny story with this too. The first pro show I ever went to was the 2012 or 2011 Toronto Pro, because I competed there as an amateur. In Canada, we had like the equivalent of like a state level show, like a provincial show. that was attached to the Toronto Pro back in the day. Now it's a pro qualifier, but back then it was like a provincial show, so a step down, which they've removed that level altogether. But so I competed there as an amateur, as a junior, and I did watch the pro show there. It was my first time ever seeing a pro show, but I remember this show. So this was only the second bodybuilding show I'd ever been to. Period. Like I had done my regional show in the year before. My first show I'd ever seen, ever watched, ever been to anything of any kind of show was the first show I ever did. And then the second show I went to was this show in Toronto. And I remember back in the day, they were a little looser with the tanning regulations. And I remember showing up to get tanned at the Toronto Pro, and they send me into the room, and I walk in, and I'm getting sprayed in the same room with the pro female bodybuilders. So it's just like, I'm like 19 years old, and there's just like naked pro bodybuilder women just walking around naked everywhere. And I'm like, oh my God. I was like so thrown off. I was like, what the fuck is going on here? It was like, of like curiosity and like worry of like, I'm supposed to fucking be here, They walk around so nonchalantly. They're just like butt naked, walking around getting sprayed like a 19-year-old kid. Like they were spraying junior bodybuilders with pro women. It was like the weirdest thing,
Dude, that backstage scene gets a little weird.
So, like, this was in the years where they enforced like guys wearing stocks and like, what I mean? Like it was a whole different world. They're spraying men and women together. And like I was 19, second show I'd ever been at, And the first show I did, I tanned myself. So I didn't even go in a tanning room, let alone. So this was like a huge eye-opening experience for me. It was getting into that for sure.
I always thought that was the biggest joke. Was like, there's a box of socks over there. I'm like, what the fuck am I going to do with that? Seriously, what's the point? What are we doing?
They're getting a little more strict. I have to, because that wasn't even a thing until like the last like 2 or 3 years of my career, and then it kind of became the standard. Which like, look, if you're a tanning girl and you don't want to stare at my dick all day, fine. I don't care. That's for you, not for me. So
that's awesome.
Do you have a most embarrassing moment of your career? I mean, you kind of touched a little bit on the Sebum Hani thing, but I guess like more of like a physical, like
none that come to mind. I'm generally a pretty hard person to embarrass, so there might be things that happen that I've like forgot about already because like I didn't get that embarrassed. I mean, with the podcast and like all these things, I put myself out there at such like an extreme level. Like, there's not much I haven't divulged that I like that goes on in my life from extremely intimate things. So it's tough for me to get embarrassed. It's only really, like I said, in an instance like the one with Chris, where I embarrassed someone else by my decisions. And I think that was probably the only one that really stands out. And because that one was obviously like such a big moment in both of our careers of like, changing that kind of dynamic we had amongst us,
That's fair.
What was your
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I have one last one. What was your biggest cheat meal or like the most outrageous amount of food you ate in one sitting? I gotta know this.
The first show I ever did, like when I was a junior, 19, 18, whatever, doing my first show, I ate nothing. And it wasn't like a one-time cheat meal. This was like a continuous week or two. And I ate nothing but fast food burgers exclusively. This wasn't like I was eating candy or like sushi. I ate 5 to 6 meals a day of nothing but fast food burgers for 7 days straight.
Hell yeah.
Oh,
like
wow.
I'd wake up in the morning and go get like McDonald's breakfast sandwiches, like 4 or 5 of them, and go to work. Go work or train clients or whatever. And then during the day, I'd go get like Five Guys for lunch, and then I'd get Wendy's. And then on my way, I'd go get like another set of burgers. And then I'd be like late at night, I'd be like, I'm hungry. I'd drive down the road to McDonald's again. And I was doing that like 5, 6 meals a day. And I did that every single day from the Sunday after the show till at least a week. Like, and I think by the end of the week, I was up like 40 pounds, maybe.
I knew I loved Iain, man. I knew I loved this guy.
How did your stomach handle that?
I competed at 207 my first show, and I was like almost over 250 by the end of the week. And it was like to the point where I was like getting like I got like gout in my like feet and ankles. They were like train a client for 5 minutes because my feet would swell up so much, you know.
Did they
Well,
notice it?
well, it's funny because I looked really good for 3 days and then really bad after that. You know, the first couple days after the show eating like that, I looked awesome. I was fucking huge and vascular, and the body fat in the water hadn't quite sat in yet. And then, kind of like near the back end of the week, things started to get worse and worse and worse. I was still on the train. I kept it going until like it got to the point where, like I said, there was a couple days where I was like, you know, I literally can't stand without my like feet and ankles like swelling up like crazy, and it like really hurt to stand, you know. So like I'd be like, you know, going and sitting down every 10 minutes, 5 minutes, wearing compression socks and like crazy shit, you know. So
That's
yeah,
funny shit.
that was a rough one for sure. But other than that, in a single meal, I do remember I had one when I was working with Dennis James. I worked with Dennis James my rookie year, like as a pro in 2015. And he used to during prep, like, you know, say go have a cheat meal, but like, you know, a lot of those guys, like those, you know, 90s, 2000s guys, it's just like go have a cheat meal and it's very loose, you know, just like go eat whatever you want, one meal, you know. And I remember like I would take so full advantage of like the looseness of that like that wording, you know. It's like go have one meal. And I remember one day, me and Melissa and two of my friends, we went to this all-you-can-eat sushi spot, and we must have sat there for like 3 hours eating sushi. And we ordered like, you know, they give you like the little ice cream in like the one bowl, you know.
Mhm.
And I ordered like 10 of every flavor that they had. We sat there until we were like laying, like sleeping on the benches, like all. And
Food
like,
coma.
yeah, we like until we got to the point where we were so comatose we actually couldn't drive home. We must have eaten, you know, like between the four of us, like a few hundred pieces of sushi and like hundreds of scoops of ice cream.
Gosh.
You know,
That's
and then
awesome.
it's like that your vision's not even working because your blood sugar is so fucked up. You know, you're like seeing fog and like, you know,
I
you're like
wonder what the waiter thought.
sleep here for 15 minutes before I drive home or I'm gonna kill someone.
Yeah, that was funny.
That's
Oh my
awesome.
gosh.
And
Wow.
now they put 2 hour limits on those
Yeah,
sushi all you can eat.
that's some bullshit, right, Steph? You and me can
Oh,
eat. We know that.
Yeah,
oh my goodness.
specific sushi place closed down, and I'd like to just like think that we are partially responsible.
I would say you probably put them right out of business. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was funny.
That's, yeah,
Oh
Bill
my
calls
God.
that the bulletproof zone. You know, before everything spills over,
That's it. You're
and then it's
bulletproof for
over.
like 2 days. You're good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you got 3 days
Hmm.
back, you know, like that you got after that show to like look really good before things start to get real fucking shitty, you know. So
Yeah.
Hmm.
but no,
Yeah.
I definitely, you know, it's I'm kind of glad I did that so overboard my first show because then I was so much more like tactical with my like out of my like what's the word we use for coming out of shows again?
Rebound.
Rebound.
Reverse.
Rebound.
My like rebound approach like later or after that was like so much more like intentional, you know, because
Mhm.
all right, like I kind of knew the limits here. So, you know, I kind of I from there I was like, okay, I have a day or two, you know, I can eat a few meals, but don't get too bad. And then kind of here you got to keep back and keep your cardio in. And I had like a lot better results very quickly. And I also kind of had such a bad experience with that one. Like, you know, I really never had any like super hard like post show binges that, you know,
Oh
because
yeah.
I mean, it could really throw off like a lot of weeks of good progress,
Oh yeah.
you know, doing
I
something.
went I went to Mexico like the day after I competed, which was a humongous mistake. But like me and my boys, we ate so much shit. I wound up puking. It was just horrible. But it, you
But if
know,
you can control that, that's the best time to go on vacation because you look
that's
awesome.
right. But I couldn't.
After the 2020 Olympia, me and Chris and Melissa and Courtney all went on vacation together to Mexico. And like we were literally 1 week post Olympia. So we're like still full tan. We're peeled out of our mind. Like, you know, I was like an open bodybuilder. He just won the Olympia. We're like walking on the beaches and people are like, what the fuck
Fuck
are
is
you?
it?
You know?
Hmm.
Like we're so tan. We're like veins everywhere. Like I'm like 280 at this point. You know, people are like, what the fuck is going on here? You know? First at a resort, it's like never seen anything like that. They literally just have no idea how to process what they're seeing. You
It's funny.
That's
It's awesome. I
awesome.
love it.
Hmm.
Chris will make fun of me because I'll pick a show date based on a vacation. Like
know?
I'll pick a show date 1 to 2 weeks prior to, and it's usually the Olympia. So
Always
I'd
the
always
yeah.
compete late September to go to the Olympia a couple weeks later.
Got to look good on vacation. You know,
Yeah.
Hmm.
nobody
Yeah.
wants to
Yeah.
be going on vacation when you're like 320-pound like whale. Sometimes it's nice because like when you're that big, people definitely are like, this is crazy to see. But you also like, when you're in that good a condition, and like you feel really cool going on vacation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd rather be shredded on vacation than a big fat fuck.
For sure. And the
I'll
thing
come
is,
back. I'll come back a big fat fuck.
the average person too, like me being 260 in competition or being 320, they're all so big they don't know the difference. You know,
Yeah.
one is lean and one is not, and that's the only difference they know. You know, they're
Right.
all it's all so big that they don't know that one's big and one's bigger. It's just what the hell is that thing? You know,
Just like, holy shit! Look at the size of that guy.
Oh my goodness.
That's great.
Well, this was a blast, man. I appreciate you coming on.
yeah, of course, man. Thank you guys for
Yeah.
having.
Yeah, we really
Thank
appreciate it.
you.
Yeah, it's great. Thanks, Iain. Appreciate you, man.
Yeah.
Thanks all you do for the sport too, man. You're a real ambassador,
Mhm.
so we appreciate that too.
Yeah, are you guys going to the Arnold?
No, we won't. We'll be at the Olympia, of course. This time, if you need tickets, let me know.
Yeah. I don't even have Arnold tickets. It's like 2 weeks from now.
No shit.
Like the ultimate, like don't get tickets and just like hope it works out. And it always, as of now, I have no reason to not trust my like way of going about this. You know, it always someone will show up and be like, "Hey, you got tickets?" I'm like, "No, we didn't," and I just end up, So it always ends up working.
That's funny.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks again. Make sure we want to hear your biggest cheat meal from the viewers. Make sure to like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Awesome. See you guys.
See you,
Thank
bud.
you.
Thank you.